skip with cheating for 1 day a week. Things were not going well with Talia and me. I could barely remember the last time we had sex, and I certainly couldn't remember the last time we made love. About 2 years ago, Talia started rejecting my advances. We'd had a healthy sex life before that. Sure, it had dwindled to 2 or 3 if I was lucky and had a drink, times a week, but it still wasn't bad, even at 50. I was 50, Talia was 48, and she looked at approaching 50 as approaching a dental drill without Novocaine. Whenever I assured her that she was beautiful and very desirable, it didn't make her feel better. It pissed her off. She started locking me in the bedroom if I slipped in and spoke lovingly to her. Menopause. I know it's not a big deal for women, but it's definitely a big deal for men. It didn't put my love life on hold. It razed it to the ground. Somehow, after more than 25 years of marriage, I had become disgusted with my wife. I don't know what I did or said, but whenever I was near her, she would gnash her teeth and growl. For almost 2 years I paced around, sleeping most nights on the couch. Silly me, I let my wife turn our guest room into a sewing room. I didn't think it was a good time to evict her from there. I showered only to try to relieve the tension in my body. But even that was usually denied, with Talia pounding on the bathroom door and screaming for the neighbors to hear, "John Spencer, you better not be having sex in there! We have a big water bill!" Our neighbor, Mrs. Sanborn, who now looked like she was about to spit on me, exaggeratedly tried to walk past me in the hall or elevator without hitting someone she clearly considered a pervert. Mr. Sanborn just looked at me with pity in his eyes, but a smirk played on his lips. I had reached my breaking point. I was miserable, my wife was miserable, and apparently even the neighbors were unhappy about our problems. I started looking up information about the divorce on my work computer. I was afraid to do this at home. It could lead to Armageddon. But things didn't look good. My wife had never worked, she'd probably get alimony, and I'd probably be stuck with the rent payments. Plus, there seemed to be a good chance that she would end up with most of our assets besides the apartment. Well, at least my wife would finally have sex with me again. So by staying married, at least I wasn't paying for 2 properties. If I got divorced, I'd never make love. I wouldn't even be able to take a girl out to dinner at McDonald's. I was totally screwed. So when I came home and found my wife at the dining room table with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and heard a menacing, "Honey, we need to talk," I was shocked. Talia started to talk to me, but I was in a daze. The sleeping with other men phase came through as I realized where this was going. She wanted to have sex with other men. She couldn't bring herself to get into bed with me, and now she needed new men to play with? I realized she had paused and was looking at me expectantly. I felt anger boiling up inside me, and I yelled, "Sorry, Mrs. Sanborn." "And what am I supposed to do while you cheat on me with every man you can find?" I felt myself hit a nerve as the shock reflected on her face. The sense of triumph dissipated when the look turned to anger and Talia slapped the table with both hands before reaching out and slapping me. Hard. I was stunned, but it brought me out of the daze I was in. "This is why I hate you sometimes." Tears appeared in my wife's eyes. "I don't want to sleep with other men. I don't want to sleep with any man, including you." She wiped her eyes and took a sip of wine. "I meant to say asshole." Talia used weasel words. "I was going to say I'm done having sex. When you touch me, it makes me want to scream. Just thinking about sex makes me want to rip your arms off." "No, I said it wasn't fair to you. Even though more and more often I feel like I'd rather kill you than touch you, I still love you. I love our life together. I know you're hurting, and I know your showers aren't helping." Yeah, especially when someone knocks on that door. "I was going to say," she paused and looked into my eyes, "I think you should sleep with other people." "With other women?" I asked cautiously, not believing this conversation. "You want me to sleep with other women?" "Yes." "Silly," my wife said quietly. At least better than an asshole, I thought. I didn't know whether to be glad or not. I remembered my thoughts on dating after my divorce and spoke without thinking. "Talia, I'm a 50-year-old man. Not wealthy and not particularly fit. If my own wife finds me unattractive, I don't think there's going to be a line of people lining up to get into bed with me. I've thought it through. Vivian, a girl I know from the gym, saw your pictures and offered her help. Here, look. Talia held out the phone. Vivian looked either Filipino or Southeast Asian, possibly Thai, and was very pretty, if not downright beautiful. Maybe mid-30s, though I've always had trouble determining the age of Asian women. I felt my libido start to rise as I appreciated the size of this woman. She wants to sleep with me? Are you kidding me? My mouth seemed to open as my wife's hand reached across the table again. I flinched, but she only nudged my chin, covering my mouth. "Stop drooling," she said. "I don't get it either," she continued, looking at me dismissively. "But some women like older men." I was still holding her phone, looking at the image of what could have been mine. I swallowed the saliva in my mouth that threatened to turn into drool. "So?" my wife asked impatiently. "I'm trying to be polite, so what do you think?" I could barely nod my head, but that satisfied the stroppy woman who didn't want to have sex. "Fine. I have a contract for you to sign." I looked up surprised. "Relax, buddy. It says you'll spend Saturday from 5 o'clock to 10 Sunday morning with Vivian. You can do whatever you want during those hours. Have sex, go out to dinner, sleep, watch a movie. Your choice. That should take the edge off." "But you're still my husband. It's just Saturday night. The rest of the time you're with me. No other women. I'm only giving you this pass. If you go any further, there will be consequences. We'll get divorced, and you'll pay the full price." "Understood, Buster?" "Shouldn't I at least meet her first?" I said uncertainly, not wanting to blow the deal. I almost groaned, so tense was I. And it was only Tuesday. "You'll see her on Saturday." I could see the anger rising in Talia's eyes. I picked up my pen and signed her document. Talia smirked, tucking the document away in a folder and walking out from behind her desk. It occurred to me that I should have read the document or asked for a copy. Then I thought, what's the harm in that? Yeah, I know, it's stupid, but excitement always trumps stupidity. Finally, Saturday came and I went to Vivian's apartment. When she opened the door, I saw that her picture didn't do her justice. She was gorgeous. She reached out and took my hand, pulling me into the apartment and enclosing me in her arms. "Hey, handsome, I've been waiting all week for this." With those words, she pulled me to her and gave me the most passionate kiss of my life. I was so tense that it hurt when she pulled away and led me into the bedroom. She undressed me and pushed me onto the bed. Then she smiled at me, caressing my body. Then we made love, slowly and sensually. It was great. We had pizza delivered, which we ate in bed between more sex. Everything I wanted, she promised and did. At 50, Vivian hardly expected much, but it shouldn't have surprised her that 2 years later I had 4 good sessions in me, and she got them all out of me. Thus began perhaps the most satisfying time of my married life. I was sexually satisfied. One night with Vivian could have carried me away for not 1, but 2 weeks. I was glowing. I was soaring. I annoyed Talia with a smile that seemed permanently fixed on my face, but she took it with grace, laughing at me and shaking her head. Talia and I had found balance in our lives, and for the first time in years, were almost universally pleasant to each other. She seemed to have regained her sense of humor, and I found myself enjoying her company again. But I lived on Saturdays. Vivian and I would go out to dinner, plays, movies, or dances, and then return to her apartment for a night of sweet magic. Sunday morning almost always began with lovemaking. Life was beautiful. Talia asked how things were going with Viv and me. Vivian even told me that Talia asked if she could record our lovemaking. Talia said she missed it, which was news to me. I was hesitant to let Viv fulfill Talia's request. I felt bad about taping something, but Viv said it would be fun, and what she was doing at that moment probably influenced my thoughts. So I gave the okay. She set my phone to record and pestered me for a moment before looking into the camera and saying, So, Mrs. Spencer, is this the husband you didn't want? Well, it's mine now, you old fat cow. With those words, she laughed, and before I could object to her calling my wife a cow, she started making love to me. I later objected to her comment, so we filmed a second session, and Vivian sent it to Talia and deleted the fat cow. The next Saturday at Vivian's apartment, no one answered the door. I pulled out my phone to call her, but as I listened to the call go to voicemail, an attractive young woman approached me. "Mr. Spencer? Mr. John Spencer?" she inquired. Thinking she had a message from Vivian, I nodded and answered in the affirmative. She handed me an envelope, said, "You have been served," and took a picture of me standing with my mouth open. As she left, she informed me that enclosed with the divorce papers was a restraining order and the number of Talia's attorney, whom I should call to arrange a supervised visit to pick up my belongings. My calls to Vivian went unanswered, and 2 days later the number was disconnected, and I discovered that Talia had blocked my calls. The only contact I had was a lawyer. He arranged for a sheriff's deputy to accompany me to the house to retrieve my clothes. The locks had been changed, but my friend Joey was there with a key. "Talia asked me to let you in. She doesn't want to see you, John. Sorry." Joey was the police detective I'd grown up with. He exchanged greetings with the deputy. Trust me, Joey knows everyone. "Not your fault, buddy. I don't suppose you have room for me at home." I didn't expect him to say yes, and he didn't. "I'm sorry, dude. I love you both, so I'm not going to take sides between you and Talia." I expected that, but it disappointed me. I'd known Joey since second grade, and he'd been the best man at my wedding. He's only known Talia for the last 25 years. Yes, I know, that sounds lame to me, too. I spent 2 days in a budget hotel before I found a shabby studio to rent for a month. There was barely enough room for my clothes, but I didn't think I could afford anything else. When I found a lawyer, he advised me on how to handle my finances. But of course, when I got to the bank, I found that Talia had already withdrawn almost all the money. It was the same at the investment company we were using. What had gone wrong? Why was Talia so upset with me that she had filed for divorce, and on the grounds of adultery? I told the lawyer about our arrangement, set up by Talia herself. I even told him about the signed agreement. "What did it say?" he asked. I didn't know. I hadn't really read it. I told him that, according to Talia, it simply said that I could spend Saturday night with Vivian, a girl she found at the gym, and the rest of the week I belonged to her. "Oh, and there will be consequences if I do anything else but Saturday night. I'll be poor and divorced." "And what did you do?" he asked. "I don't know. I thought things were all right between us. And now this." I was miserable and stunned. "Well, next time, bring your copy of the contract." He just shook his head when I said I never got a copy. I didn't realize I'd need one. Yeah, stupid again. At least that's what my lawyer's look said. When I told the whole story that it was Talia's idea and she found Vivian for me at the gym, my lawyer seemed relieved. "So this Vivian can corroborate your story? Does she know about the agreement with Talia?" When I confirmed that she did, he asked for her address and phone number. "Well, here's the deal. She moved, and her phone number was canceled. I don't know how to contact her." I told him. The lawyer took a deep breath. "What about her family, friends, or employer? Surely they can contact her." I bashfully replied, "I don't know anything about them. We've never socialized outside of the bedroom." The lawyer rubbed his face in annoyance. "So it's your word against your wife's? Guess what, buddy?" he finished. "Yep, screwed up again. In court, my wife told me that she was going through menopause, and her insensitive husband resented it, went so far as to get himself some cheating girlfriend, and even made her send me a video of them having sex. Worse, his young mistress called me an old fat cow." The lawyer walked her through the humiliating questions. "What number the video was taken from?" "My husband's number," was the answer, followed by more sobbing. The lawyer shook his head. "And what was your husband doing when his mistress called you an old fat cow?" "He yelled he was coming," she sobbed. "Hearing me humiliated turned him on." The judge, an old gray-haired maiden, looked at me spitefully. Who would have thought Mrs. Sanborn was a judge? Talia's lawyer submitted the videotape as evidence. Fortunately, the judge said she would review it in chambers. Without waiting for the lawyer's response, Talia declared, "I loved him. For almost 26 years I took care of him, nursed him back to health, and gave him my body. But now that I'm old and dry, he's thrown me away." She looked at me, openly sobbing. "I was on hormones. Why couldn't you have been patient and waited for me?" I think my eye was the only dry eye in the courtroom. I even saw my attorney brushing away a tear. On cross-examination, Talia denied knowing about any agreement. Why would I want the love of my life to be with another woman? With a younger woman? Sobbing again. "Where do you think your husband went every Saturday night until Sunday morning?" inquired the lawyer. "To fishing," declared Talia, "and he always smelled like fish when he came home." Who would have thought Mrs. Sanborn had a sense of humor? Her snort echoed around the courtroom, causing an outburst of laughter, which she brought down with her gavel. Speaking in court, I recounted how Talia had set me up with Vivian and the agreement she had proposed and drafted. On cross-examination, I was asked to produce a copy of this so-called agreement. I heard the judge snort again, this time mockingly, when I said that I didn't have a copy, that only my wife had one. Talia's lawyer held out a picture of Vivian to me, a mugshot. "Is this the woman you knew as Vivian?" he asked. I nodded, looking at the photograph. "Your Honor, when we were looking for this girl to serve her with a subpoena, we were able to identify her as a known call girl, Rey Obispo. She has a long record of solicitation in many cities and usually leaves after a few months. We suspect she has moved on." He walked back to the table where my wife was sitting and picked up some papers. "Your Honor, I have here the checking account records we got on a warrant from Mr. Spencer's bank. We needed the warrant because Mrs. Spencer is not listed on that account and has no access to the records." From my seat, I objected. "Yes, we've always kept our accounts separate. But Talia does all of our family's bookkeeping and has all of my passwords. For heaven's sake, she keeps the checkbook balance, not me." "That's not true, Your Honor," Talia replied from her desk. "I don't know his passwords. He never gave them to me." The judge banged her gavel, ordering us both to be silent unless we were questioned. "Mr. Spencer, could you take a look at the highlighted entries in these statements covering the last 7 months?" the lawyer asked, practically shoving the papers in my face. "Could you tell us what those records are?" "Well, they look like money transfers from my account," said I, perplexed. "For how much money?" he asked. 500 Sadraurs. I shook my head. "To each his own. But I've never done them. What is it?" The lawyer wasn't finished. "On what days were these transactions made?" "What? You want me to list the dates of each of them?" To which he alluded. "No, sir. Only the day of the week on which they were made." Lawyers do have a sly smile. I watched and figured it out. Then it hit me. Stupidity again. They were all done 7 days apart. Saturdays. They all happen on Saturdays. Triumphant, the lawyer snatched up the new papers proving, he said, that the transfers were made to an account that Ms. Obispo used to collect fees. "So, while your poor wife was at home suffering from hot flashes, you were spending the family savings at $500 apiece to indulge your selfish sexual fantasies." I weakly stated that Vivian had set the whole thing up, but I'm not sure anyone heard me over Judge Sanborn's gnashing of teeth. It was over. Vivian got the apartment, 70% of our savings and investments, and 30% of my paycheck as alimony. I was to pay her attorney fees and rent and maintenance for the apartment for the next 5 years. As we left the courtroom, Talia was still sobbing and moaning, repeating over and over again, "But I loved him!" She had won, but she looked so miserable that I wanted to comfort her. But when I looked up, I saw there was no need. My buddy Joey had his arm around my wife's waist, and with his other arm, he was cradling her sobbing head against his chest as they left the courtroom. Not surprisingly, when the divorce was finalized, Joey's address changed. Not that I blame him. The apartment I renovated was much nicer than his bachelor pad. I spent the next few years struggling financially, going to cheap bars where, thankfully, there were even cheaper women. I had more sex than I had during our marriage, but none of it was quality. I'd trade it all for one last session with, well, Vivian or Ray, of course. Joey was welcome at Talia's, though I resented the fact that he was getting a hefty chunk of my paycheck and the apartment, too. I hoped he was a necrophiliac because, from what I understood, sex with Talia was just that. I just didn't know it until Vivon and a whole host of cheap women showed up after my divorce. Epilogue. A few years later, I went to a convention in Detroit and ran into Ray Obispo. She seemed happy to see me and felt no guilt about playing a role in my divorce. "Hey, that was a great gig for me. I liked you, I had fun, and I got $500 a week, plus they paid for my apartment. It was the nicest place I've had in years." She smiled a sly smile. "And the other 6 nights a week I could bring my male dogs home. I was in Clover." I couldn't stay mad at her. She gave me $350 a night at the friends and family rate and ended up staying until late, and I missed the conference. The story came out already in bed as I drank samosas from the room to cool off. Yeah, I knew Joey back in his service in Vice. He was one of those guys that would give you a pass for a BJ or quick sex in an alley. He wasn't very... I was surprised your wife traded you for him. I guess it worked for Talia. She preferred the sex to be quick. I laughed. Actually, I always thought she preferred to avoid it altogether, though she didn't turn me down until the very end. Joey was the one who offered me the deal and got me into the apartment. He had cameras recording our dates, but apparently he figured out that they weren't admissible or something, because eventually they made me take a video on your phone. I kept putting it off because, well, $500 a week, and... She tilted her head and fluttered her eyelashes. "I really liked having you as my boyfriend. I liked our dates. You weren't just there to have fun. You seemed to care about me, taking me to dances and on real dates." Suddenly she sobbed. "No one has treated me like this since high school. Now I'm just a paid cheater." She cried to herself, and I comforted her, and she gave me more hours than I paid for. When she finally had to leave, I told her that next time I was in Detroit, we'd go on a real date. "Really?" she asked hopefully, and tears came to her eyes. "Really?" I kissed her goodbye. No, not really, I thought. She was really great at free sex, but for $350? $500? After 25 years with Talia, I had enough to wish for. The cheapness was just a bonus. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.